Hi, Bridget. Welcome to your show.
Hey, Stephanie. Thanks for interviewing me.
I'm so glad to do this. This is really fun. Just to give a little intro to everybody else who doesn't know who I am a new team member with Women's Wellness Collaborative, and I also have my own podcast. So Bridget had, knowing that I have a little bit of experience in this, Bridget asked me to interview her today about what's been going on for the past year and give you all an update on where things are moving. So, are we ready to get started, Bridget?
Yeah. I'll just share too how we met. I think maybe you first reached out to me to be on your podcast, your fertility podcast, and then you were on our fertility week in 2016. And then you had a baby. Maybe we can talk more about that later.
Sure.
So your career has kind of changed. And now you wear a lot of hats, it sounds like, but one thing you're doing is working with us, which has been really fun.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was thinking about it before we got started. It's kind of funny that it's almost like we're trying to cover all the bases. You know, I interviewed you on my podcast. You interviewed me on your podcast. Now I'm interviewing you on your podcast.
Okay. Well, next I have to interview you on your podcast.
Yeah,
then
there
we'll
we
be
go.
complete.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, we ready to jump into sort of our review of 2017?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, how was your 2017? I know a lot has happened.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this year has been like 2 or 3 years already in 1 year. So I thought, first when I concocted this, I thought, well, people might want to know what I'm studying now. But then I thought, well, people might want to know kind of what I've been up to, because I get to share little bits and pieces, but not sort of everything. So I hope people will enjoy this, because it's definitely some frame of reference about my health and just decisions I've made that maybe will help other people. So yeah, starting 2017, I was in a rental house in Portland that we had moved back to after our old house had mold and we traveled. And so we got this rental house in this kind of non-committal way, which was a good decision because we were pretty sick last winter. It was a horribly cold, wet winter, and I was still pretty sick. I think the Epstein-Barr virus, which we can talk more about, was really rearing its head. I could only kind of work like a half a week. So we made the decision, I don't know, probably late in the winter, that we would move to Arizona, where we now are. So there was that decision and big change. And then I still own my clinic in Portland. So obviously if we're going to move, well, I guess I could have still owned it. A few people asked me that, but I was ready to be done some years earlier, and I really didn't want to own it from afar. So I worked really hard and frankly put a lot of intention into selling it, and finally sold it, which was super exciting. And we signed the papers like the day I left town. The same day. So there wasn't much transition, but a huge transition of career for me to no longer own the clinic, to be able to dedicate 100% to this online business. So that was a big, exciting change. Still some loose ends. We're still billing clients. I don't know if you're in the insurance world. There's still things to deal with, but it's mostly done. And lots of work on my health still this year, as I started to mention, just doing different experiments, trying different practitioners. We can talk more about that and what I've learned. And then I would say the kind of final couple sectors that I've been working on a lot this year is my marriage. And I kind of blogged about that about a year ago, and what I'm learning, and then my emotional health too. It's very wrapped up in our overall health. And I think, as you're a title licensed marriage
and
counselor.
family therapist.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we're always uncovering like new layers of old hurts or habits that we carry around emotionally. So. Yeah, I think it's been a lot of year of review and making decisions. And a lot of that sounds pretty heavy, but I I think it's okay to talk about some of the heavy things and also like coming out on the other side. And some things I feel like I am on the other side, and some I'm still in progress. But yeah, we've made a lot of really big changes, and it's for the most part really exciting. We're happy to be in a new home. I'm very excited to be completely dedicated to this online business. It's been my love.
Yeah.
It's been my second love for a long time. And now it gets to be my first and only love, which is great.
That is so great. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the physical health, the kinds of changes that you've made? You talked about experiments that you've done, trying different practitioners. What can you tell us about that and how you've worked with that?
Yeah, so summer of 2016, we were sort of on a hiatus and traveling to get away from the mold, and then came back, as I mentioned, and pretty quickly I started to get sick again with like this chronic swollen glands, kind of achy and chills, fatigue, and it felt pretty viral again. And I found an article back then by my practitioner at the time was a naturopath who did say, I think that a lot of this is Epstein-Barr, but I don't think I had my head wrapped around that. Like, I think I need to understand something pretty well to get behind it, and I need to kind of invest some of my own research. So anyway, I read an article that someone shared on Facebook, and it was by this Anthony Williams, who's a medical medium, and he was talking about how when you have Epstein-Barr virus, it can hide in your thyroid gland, and that's how you develop autoimmune thyroid. And just the way this article was written, it was a pretty big light bulb for me. Like everything he described sounded like me. So that was interesting. And from that, I started, now I'm going to forget the name of it, but I started a prescription that can be used for Epstein-Barr. Is it Valcitrix or Valcyclovir, I think it's called. I tried that and it seemed to work for like 6 or 8 weeks. I felt really good. And I think it's developed for herpes or something, but it works for Epstein-Barr. But then it kind of stopped working. And some other things I did around that time, I did the now I'm forgetting what it's called. I should have written more notes. I did that diet for like gas and bloating. I did this kind of special diet. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name now, but I'll put it in the notes later. But I did some dietary experiments. What else did we do? I was doing the sauna a lot. I'm a big fan of sauna for detox. And then in the spring, I think it was about the spring, I started to do some different herbs for Epstein-Barr. I do so many things at once, it can be hard to tell what's doing what. But I think looking back, it did help me. Yes, I did cat's claw and lemon balm and licorice. So I do think those helped me in the spring. And I started doing this energy system called Ness, and we can link to that as well. But it's a little bit like homeopathy, except homeopathy is usually like you take something that's negative for the body and dilute it, and it becomes like a positive for the body. And Ness is a little bit more like a positive information for the body, like how your system should be functioning. So I started doing that, and somewhere in the whole combination of that, I felt pretty good for a bit in the spring. And then we got ready to move, and we exposed ourselves to a lot of mold again. So that was, I think, a setback. And coming and moving to Arizona, I was having like a lot of phlegm and like a lot of, definitely through the winter, I had on and off some respiratory issues still with mold. And so for people who haven't heard much, mold toxins can house in your body and all the mucus of your body, and maybe some other places too. They're not totally sure. So yeah, it can manifest in a lot of ways. So I think moving here, we were hopeful that everything would magically get better, but it's not quite how it works. We're still dealing with a lot of what's in our body. So I've been reading more of the medical medium work lately, I'm doing a lot of dietary stuff for Epstein-Barr. Saw a new naturopath down here and did some ozone therapy for my blood. I did some kind of homeopathics with him. But it's pretty expensive. So,
Oh, sure.
yeah, I spent a lot of money on all this stuff. But I'm still not done. And that's why I like to talk a lot about chronic health, because I'm really healthy in a lot of ways. I have great habits. I mean, if I didn't have such good habits, I don't know where I'd be right now. So to some extent, there's some things that are good, but I still deal with like swollen glands and feeling like I have the flu for no reason, and memory, as I'm demonstrating here sometimes.
You sound like you're doing great to me.
And I just retested my nose. We did an episode, I think last year, on Min.Marcons, which is an infection you can have in your nose. And I tried to treat it herbally, but I retested and it's still there. So I'm probably going to do like a pharmaceutical to treat this Min.Marcons infection in my nose, which is a staph infection in your nose that basically develops out of immune dysregulation. So if you've had, if you've had HIV, or you've had just, maybe you were just really chronically sick for a while, or you have Epstein-Barr, or you have mold, it can disrupt this bacterial environment in your nose, and you can end up with this staph infection in your nose that I still have. So that's something I'll probably be treating pharmaceutically here soon. I try to avoid pharmaceuticals, but I also just really want to feel better, and I'm willing to experiment as needed.
Yeah, I really love that you're open about that too. I think that some people get to this place where there's almost this principle that they feel like it's so important for them to stick to that they can't touch pharmaceuticals, but there is a place for those at times. Sometimes it's a good thing that Western medicine exists, right? So we can sort of marry the two of Eastern and Western approaches when necessary. So I just appreciate that you're able to talk about that and be open about that.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because I'm a health coach. I can't prescribe. So if I say, well, the only way I got rid of my nose infection was through a prescription, I just basically said I can't treat you for this. But if it's the truth, it's the truth. And maybe if I had kept trying with the herbs, maybe if I hadn't been re-exposed to mold, I don't know, maybe it would have worked. But yeah, I'm not so tied to it that I'm not willing to try a pharmaceutical approach. And you probably know from the fertility world, people can get very black and white too about what they're willing to do or not, which is in a sense fine, but you can limit. I remember one couple I saw, and they hadn't gotten pregnant for like 2 years and never had been to a doctor. And finally he went, and he had retrograde ejaculation. He doesn't expel any sperm.
Yeah.
How long are you going to go on not knowing that? Yeah. So
Really?
There's things that we can't know without you seeing a doctor, or I guess he could have bought like a microscope and looked under it or something like that. But yeah. So anyway, that's the truth of my story. As much as I can, I like to not take prescriptions, but yeah, we're going to try some things. We're going to keep trying.
Yeah, you do what you got to do, right? So do you want to share with us a little bit more about the emotional health piece as well?
Yeah, you might appreciate some of this with your background. So coming back, I guess it was still 2016, fall of 2016, coming back to Portland, I definitely was like having a lot of emotions come up to be back at like the scene of the crime, so to speak. And it was very difficult for me to do certain things like move forward with like buying furniture for our new house. I like getting emotional just thinking about it, because it's like I didn't want to be stuck in Portland. I didn't want to be stuck. I didn't want to get mold again and ruin our furniture again. So I started to see a counselor. I think she was marriage and family counselor, but I'm not sure. I hadn't done this in many years, and she was great. It's such a simple tool. It's really mostly just good listening, a little feedback, a little suggestion, a redirection. It was really good. So that was really good for me to talk about the mold and how I was feeling about my health. I really encourage it, for people who are going through chronic illness. It's kind of what you do with your fertility clients is, give them a space to talk, because there's an illness and then there's our reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both happening at the same time. And
Yep.
the one that's the emotional piece, you can have more control over to some extent. I guess that's debatable, but we do have control over how we react to things, or we can, rethink about how we react to things. So that was good. And in the midst of that, and I wrote about this on my blog, my husband kind of came out to tell me he wasn't happy about certain things in our marriage, and, to a pretty extreme point. So here I was kind of still reeling from this mold and PTSD from being back in town. And then there was this layer, but we had to, I'm thankful that he was willing to kind of work on it with me. Because initially he wasn't sure what he was willing to do or what was possible. But we got our marriage counselor. That was helpful. But then we got kind of busy moving. I think we were in a better place, but probably you know this from your work too. Like, it was not like we were quite done.
Right.
So we moved and a lot changed. And then I started working with a life coach since I've moved here. And one of my aims with that was to work on the marriage. And it's really about this time, like, working on myself and how I react to him, and, why I told my husband the other day is, like, most of the time when I get mad at you, it's not really about you. And that's something I need to own and just learn about more, is like, which triggers me, why do we react in certain ways? What's the different way I can react? And that's been really good. This is not the easiest thing to talk about in public, but these are some of the most core things for our health, right? If we have a neglected relationship or some pattern we're in that isn't working, it's really important to work on it. So I think this between our first sessions with a marriage counselor and now seeing a life coach, and really journaling about my feelings and just being aware of myself, and then I have a choice in how I react to things, is helping me a lot. And it's an important, I think, rich layer that we still want to talk about at Women's Wellness Collaborative. One trend that I don't like, and I'm mentioning this on the podcast more and more, is I don't like that functional medicine is this thing where you read labs and you just give different pills. That's just only a partial treatment, and it's missing the holistic side of treatment, which is so critical. So yeah, I'm sharing a bit about it because it's important to me. It's important to my health and happiness, and hopefully it helps other people kind of be inspired to do that hard work too.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect picture of how all of these things tie in together, that the emotional, the physical, the relational, they all affect one another. And so it's almost as if we start to work on one area, we can't help but start to work on the other areas, because that homeostasis isn't there anymore. You've disrupted some piece, and so then it affects the others, and those are disrupted. So you kind of have to be working on all of it at one time.
I think so. I feel like our marriage counselor kind of said that. She's like, well, you've gone through one chapter, and now you have to go through this other chapter. It's all the same book you're in right now. Yeah, it's true. And I think you and I have seen this with our fertility work. Like, some women will feel that stress come up, and the judgment and the worry about infertility, and they'll say, well, this is what's causing it. But I say it's only partly true, because there's still the physical body. It's great to work on the emotional stuff. Maybe you'll have a breakthrough that you feel you'll attribute to the physical stuff. But yeah, I think having respect for both sides, just like we talked about with Western medicine and kind of alternative medicine, like having some respect for both is sort of like the same with emotional health and physical health. You can't, like you said, you can't kind of like ignore one for the other on either end. So mostly I run into people who are, because we teach a lot about body system, mostly I run into people who are focusing too much on the physical ignoring the emotional of it. And maybe you see, I'm not sure, but maybe you see people who are very focused on the emotional aren't as willing to look at the physical. What do you find?
Well, it's really tough for me when I work as a therapist because as far as my licensure goes, when I'm working specifically with clients, I am only able to work with them on the emotional and relationship stuff. When there are times where I want to say, like, you really need to change your diet, that's going to help this too. And I can refer people. I can let people know how important sleep is, for example. It's just I have to walk sort of a fine line there. And so a lot of the people I see, they are, of course, focused on the emotional and relational stuff, which is good. There's just some physical stuff that needs a lot of work. And unfortunately, in that arena, there's not much that I'm able to make suggestions about, which is one of the reasons I've sort of tried to move into coaching as well, because then I can say all the things.
Right. Yeah. Which is something I like about coaching too, is like, there's some restrictions, but there's a lot of freedom. Yeah. And it's maybe why many of us need more than one practitioner, what you're talking about. And unfortunately there's occasionally all under the same roof, but what I found is like, I had a clinic with 4 types of practitioners, and people would say, oh, I want to come in and also do counseling or something, but I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a total fit. I think sometimes that can mesh. I mean, that's what we try to do in our Restore Your Radiance program, or really anytime you work with us. We try to mesh those things, but there's just like us. Whereas I think some people's programs, if you do like a big chronic illness program, they do give you like an energy kind of coach and a nutritionist and a, functional practitioner. You're going to pay for all those bells and whistles.
Sure, that's right.
But it's a cool model to integrate it, or you can just make it on your own. Like, I really don't encourage people to have only us. And I get that, especially working online. Like, I think online is incredible, but I still have a local ND, chiropractor, massage therapist, I'll probably get a therapist here eventually. Like, it takes, more than one person to assist you with all these various aspects of health.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Because and one person can't specialize in all of these things too. So
True.
I'd be leery of somebody who does say, I can do all of this stuff for you.
Yeah, I mean, they're having to be spending a lot of time with you too, and it's why it's probably a reason why this trend is happening in functional medicine. It's like, if you get someone who has a medical license and they're busy and they're running these labs, they don't have time always to sit down and hear about your emotional health or walk you through your diet.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where, more like a coaching role comes in.
Yeah. So, Bridgit, in light of all of these changes and all these experiences you've had over this past year, what big lessons have you learned?
Yeah, I probably mentioned some of them. I jotted down a few, though. But yeah, like being more aware of my triggers and my thoughts is really huge. Like, okay, I'm feeling like pessimistic right now. What's going on? I'm going to write a blog about this soon, but this is what my life coach was teaching with me. It's like, there's something going on. It's uncomfortable. And then I need to tap into the feeling. Right? Like, what am I feeling here? What's like at the core of it? I definitely see this in myself. I start to get crabby. I start to get, and it's like there's something underneath that's more fundamental. And then it, like, kind of addressing that and reframing that. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. So sometimes I get anxious on the weekends because it's unstructured and there's a lot to do, and I just feel anxious and I don't like it. So I talked to my husband, and not like just, I kind of took a step back to be like, this is not good. I don't like this. I'm acknowledging that I don't feel comfortable. I feel overwhelmed. I want it to be different. So he and I just talked, and like, instead of like maybe what used to happen, which be like, we should be doing this by now, or we should, I'm like, hey, this is the way I feel. It's uncomfortable and I want it to be different. What are some ideas here? And we talked about it a bit, and that helped shift the energy. And then sometimes for me, like just sort of writing things down. It sounds silly. It's like, why do I need an organized weekend? But if I can write things down, it gets it out of my head, and I don't feel so anxious. So just like, okay, so here I was having this anxious feeling. I chose to communicate in a mature way and get some ideas. I chose to write it down. I chose to like just be aware, like I don't want this weekend eaten up by anxiety. So how can I, shift that? So yeah, that's like an example of something that's helping me a lot. Let's see. Something else that happened in the midst of all this is just what I call like burning away my pride. Like I had a sense of I'm this health coach online and I should be a certain way. And when you lose your house and everything you own, it's sort of like being in a fire, and it's like everything's gone. And also it's gone as like any illusion, any kind of like illusion you tried to put up about yourself. Like it's just gone. I wouldn't be able to have talked so candidly as I am to you, a couple years ago. Just kind of laying it out on the line and just being okay with that. I think that's good. So that's a piece. And then maybe a piece for health that I can touch on is habits and routines. So I mentioned a few kind of technical things I'm doing, but I'm also doing a lot better on my morning routine of like journaling or writing a gratitude list, getting outside, walking in the grass, jumping on the trampoline, dry brushing my skin, rinsing out my nose, like all these little things, all this routine, it really energizes me a lot. So I'm appreciating there's other ways to get energy than food. We can also tend to focus way too much on food, I think, in this world. So you get energy from the sun and from laughing and from exercising. So that's something I would encourage people to explore if they feel like they're doing things. I would say, are you doing things like out of the box that give you energy that aren't like a pill or aren't a food? So I'm doing that. And then
I love that. That's really, that's such a mindset shift. And I really like that.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, and it's like pretty free, or you could do like you do essential oils. You could do a little essential oil to lift you up. It's like just creating, it's just like we talked about with our thoughts. Like, okay, what do we want to create? Well, I want to create a day where I have energy and I feel good. So I start my day with putting in some time to create that. And I'm telling you, it works. It works like every time, even if I've had a day where I feel a little congested or, I'm still working through some things in my body. But yeah, it helps. There's a lot there.
That's so cool. I really love that. Any other big lessons you've learned this year before I move on? I don't want to jump ahead and miss anything.
I think that's good.
Okay. So how about some big wins for Women's Wellness Collaborative this year?
Oh, so many big wins. It's good. It's exciting. I mean, this is kind of the other side of like, I can say all these horrible things about my health and you might think, oh, what's she doing? But I'm also doing a lot of great stuff.
Right.
So you can still be fairly functional even as you deal with, some health issues, which again, I think like if I didn't have all these habits, I would just be in bed. But at least I'm doing stuff. We launched in February our Restore Your Radiance program. And it's so much fun. We really enjoy it. And it's like a dual 2-person coaching program where we gang up on you for your best good. We started that in February. It's been great. And then in June, we did our big Hormone Balance After 40 event, which was like 20,000 people. And I basically produced on my own. And not that I didn't have any help, but I didn't have any company to run it. So that was a huge endeavor. and a big success. Lots of people bought that package and learned from it. We grew our community a lot. I will say I learned from that I needed more help. I had help, but definitely not enough help. And I still had my clinic. Someone had quit there, so I was filling in. It was intense.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Yeah, which brings me to kind of like this next chapter, which is like I started being like, okay, I need to hire people. So we've hired a couple more people, you and Tammy, who's doing customer service pretty recently. It took a bit with the moving and everything, but that's been honestly like a huge win, to have more help. And I'm just recognizing, like, we're trying to launch our online store, which you know about, and I'm talking to someone about helping me do that, because I just realized when I have help, it energizes me. Again, this is another way to energize besides pills. It helps me energize. It helps me move the business forward faster. And I think a big thing for me and all women is just feeling supported. You know, we want to feel supported. We often don't and feel really badly about that. But we have to create our own support. You have to ask for it. So, I'm excited. It's a really big win to be growing our team. And I think those are the three biggest ones this year.
It is exciting. And it's exciting for me to be part of and to witness. And, having started following you a couple of years ago, just before I invited you to be on my podcast, I followed what you've done since then and seen a lot of change and a lot of growth. And so now it's exciting to be part of it and see where things are going as well.
Yeah. Well, we can talk maybe about where things are going. And you have your own, podcast and health business, and it's probably fun for you too, because we get lonely when we're doing it ourselves.
Yeah, people probably don't think too much about that a lot of times we're just like in our pajamas, working on our computer by ourselves, doing these things. It's such a treat when we get to do this kind of stuff, the face-to-face stuff. It's not the norm that we're doing this part of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I actually went to Starbucks this morning to work, because sometimes I just need to get out. And this older couple sat down next to me and they're like, "Oh, are you doing homework? What are you doing?" It was like so cute. I'm like, "No, I'm doing my business." And she's like, "Well, what is it?" And I told her, she's like, "Oh, that sounds great." I said, "Yeah, it's really great, but sometimes I still get bored in a sense. I need a change of environment. That's why I'm here." It's like I need to mix it up. So it's nice to have team, have collaboration. This is so great about our online world. And we're still growing. So if we're looking for some people with some skills, so if you got some skills out there with graphics or with, you kind of want to do something to maybe even kind of like an internship situation that you want to kind of see the back end of our business, it's possible. If you have some skills and you want to approach us, we have a contact form on our website. And at least then we get to know each other, even if we don't have a spot for you right away.
Yeah, that's great. So, Bridgit, what are you studying now, and what can we look forward to for the future of Women's Wellness Collaborative?
I mentioned some of it. Let's see. I've been studying. I'm studying always a lot of different things at once, but I would say I'm doing some blood sugar monitoring lately and kind of learning more about adrenal dysregulation. I took up toxins course this past year. Toxins are going to be a super big theme probably in 2019. 2018 is going to be heavier on the hormone-gut connection. I think we'll do a big summit on that. And we'll launch our first kind of all-in-one group course. So I don't know what we're going to call it, but it might be called like 5 Steps to Hormone Balance or something like that, where we'll just kind of cover kind of all the things that I would want anyone to know. So we'll talk about like morning routine, and we'll talk about things that help your digestion, and we'll talk about toxins and where you find them and how to replace them. So we'll launch that probably in January. And that's going to be good because I think there's people in our community who aren't quite ready for private coaching. Although I will say we also launched this last year, our Quick Start coaching, which is a little easier price point to get in on. But still some people aren't ready for that. So this will be a group program at a lower price where we have some of the energy of being in a community. And yeah, this would be it's like my brain dump. It's like if I didn't know anything about your case and I just wanted to give you all my general information for good women's health, it's basically going to be all of it. So it's pretty exciting.
That is exciting. And that means it's accessible for a lot of people with different things that are going on. And so, so I think that is a really new, exciting piece.
Yeah, it's not very, it's not going to be very condition specific at all, which is sort of the opposite of what you're advised to do. But I think that women are attracted to us for the education, and honestly, there is a group of things that is a basis that would help most anyone. And if you're doing all those things and there's still a problem, then you can hire it out. Then you can get private coaching. Then you can run lab tests. Mm-hmm. But it's a good base, kind of no matter. I really like working with women at different ages. So if you're 22 or you're 42 or you're 62, like there's still things we all have in common as mm-hmm. women, and we can all work on that base together.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So is there anything else you want to make sure we cover before we sign off today?
Let's see. I guess since I'm getting this opportunity to talk, I'll just say if people want to reach out and ever, suggest a guest or give us some feedback, you can do that by our email. You can do it for the podcast through the iTunes rating and review. We can link to that. So, yeah, we want to hear from you as well. Oh, yeah, we still are doing our podcast survey, too. If you want to let us know what you want on the podcast in the coming years, this will probably be the last time I ask for people to fill out the survey. And then we'll do some improvements based on that feedback. What else? Yeah, look out for our group program because I think it's going to be a lot of fun in January. And then, yeah, I'd love for you to share a bit about your podcast.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Yes, so my podcast is the Holistic Fertility and Wellness Podcast. And I started that after about 8 years, actually, of infertility and all of the things that I had learned along the way, trying to improve my fertility holistically. And then there was still so much to learn. So I thought, why not just bring all of this information to one place and interview experts and get this information out to other women and couples who are experiencing the same kinds of things. And so started that when did I start that? 2016.
I think so.
Early 2016. And it has been such an incredible experience. I've met so many amazing people and interviewed so many incredible experts in different areas of things that I didn't even have any idea about before. And then providing my own input about all of the emotional and relational pieces that are involved in those fertility challenges. And then, what do you know? I got pregnant in the end of the summer last year, and now I've got my daughter. And so it was really exciting to be able to share with my listeners that all of this stuff finally worked, that there is hope, that, it ended up being almost 10 years from the time we started till the time our daughter was born. But yeah, that's a long time, yet something worked. And so it was really cool to be able to let everybody know that they can have hope as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about you and your podcast as I got ready for this, and I just think it's so incredible that you started sharing and educating before you got pregnant. Like, it's amazing. I mean, that you were like willing to give back and be open. I mean, probably from your counseling background is helpful to you to like, because not a lot of people could be comfortable with holding that space. You know, because some people say, well, I haven't been successful yet, so I can't talk about it. Or then you got pregnant, and some people might say, oh, gosh, maybe some people will feel bad, so I can't talk about it. But you're kind of modeling that we can talk about things, you know, no matter where we're at in the journey. And it's so incredible. And I guess I wonder for you, I haven't asked you this, like, is there any, now when you became pregnant, is there anything you feel like was like the smoking gun, or is that pretty hard to say?
It's just like you. It's so hard to say because there were so many things that I was doing. You know, I had made dietary changes several times. It turned out that I had some dietary sensitivities that I didn't realize before. And so after already making some changes, I had to make additional changes and take some things out. And then beyond that, like I was trying to detoxify my body and my environment using essential oils instead of lots of other things. I was getting acupuncture regularly for a year and a half. I was working out regularly. I worked on my gut health. My husband was working on his gut health and had some blood pressure issues. And so he needed to bring his blood pressure down, and working on our marriage, our intimacy. Like there's all of these things going on. So it's so hard to even say this was the thing that did it.
Yeah, which I almost kind of like, because it's it's kind of like if everybody just has a thing, then they tell everyone, oh, it was this thing. And then people, I think, get the false impression that there's just like a thing, that all the things you mentioned are so important. You know, it's kind of what we're going to do in the group program. It's like, how's your sex life? How is your communication? How's your diet? How's your gut? It's like, we need to check all these things.
Yep.
Every single one of them for health. And yeah, you don't know which one. I think that somebody we had on, is it Sarah Clark, who was on that fertility week that you were on? She did an episode on food sensitivities and fertility, which she's really into. So we could link back to that fertility week if people missed that back then. But yeah, it's really great. So I know some people, you know, my career started on fertility, and now people are all sorts of stuff listening. But we have still lots of fertility resources people can look at.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks so much for having me do this with you, Bridget. It was really a lot of fun, and I got to learn a lot of things about you that I didn't know yet. And so I'm sure all the listeners are going to be excited to hear about all these things too.
Yeah, I hope so. I was just going to get on and just talk, but I thought it might be more interesting. Sometimes when you're just talking, you're like, you don't feel like anyone's listening.
Yeah, I was like, am I making sense?
You need to talk to someone, right? Yeah. Well, thanks, Stephanie, and we really are glad to have you on your team. And people might be seeing little bits of you on Facebook and here and there, so they can get to know you too.
Sounds good to me.